This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast. Chris Graham and Scott German, and we've both given some look at this Virginia-Richmond game coming up on Saturday. We talked a little bit about it in our podcast earlier in the week, but now we've had a chance to kind of comb through both teams' depth charts, what both teams have coming back. It's the opener, so we don't really have a lot to go on. And so, Scott, I'll start it this way. I'll take us back 2 years ago, getting ready for the first game of the Bronco Mendenhall era, Virginia playing Richmond. And, we didn't know what to expect. You never know what to expect going into a season opener. And here's my first thought, Scott. When I saw the team run out of the tunnel, the UVA team run out of the tunnel, I wondered, where was everybody? I didn't know about this thing, now, which we now know well about Bronco Mendenhall, where he doesn't give everybody a number. He doesn't just have guys standing on the sidelines in uniform if they're not going to play. And so he runs out with less players than Richmond ran out with. Richmond, a 1AA team with 22 less scholarships. And, I guess he was sending a message to his team, work harder, but that day, we all remember, Virginia lost 37-20. It was never close. And here we are 2 years later getting ready to start with the same team. That's my initial thought going into this with Scott. Share with me what you're thinking heading into Saturday, UVA-Richmond.
Well, as far as the number of players that dress and stand on the sideline, I kind of agree with that mentality. I mean, there's no sense in bringing out 75, 80 players if 20 of them or 25 of them are going to sit there and basically just be glorified cheerleaders. I mean, it's important that you have them over the course of the season in case you need the depth. But, that's kind of something I am in Mendenhall's court about not having a sideline of 100 players standing there. Or you couldn't have 100, but you know what I mean. An overabundance of players that stand no chance of getting playing time. And that Richmond game of 2 years ago, I mean, you were right, dead on. 37-20, and it was that score was completely indicative of the outcome. I mean, Richmond dominated. This was not even, if this is even possible to grasp, it was not even as close as the final 17-point margin on the scoreboard said. But I don't like playing the Richmonds of the world, or William and Mary's, I guess the FCS schools now, as they're called. I mean, this game has no, it's a lose-lose situation for Virginia. It's a win-win situation for Richmond. I mean, if we go out and Virginia wins this game 49-0, I think the average fan is going to say, my gosh, Richmond is just really, really poor, weak, and, that we can't get a real bearing on this game because we're playing an FBS team. Maybe we did lose to them a couple of years ago. If we lose to them, Lord only knows, the sky is falling mentality is going to set in. Charlottesville could set in real quickly, considering their first three games. So I just don't. If I were a schedule maker, an AD, I would just somehow or another do away with these games. I don't like them. I don't like them in game one, and we essentially have another one late in the season, even though they're not an FCS team any longer. They're an FBS team in Liberty. So I'm still a little bit perplexed at our schedule making, but again, going back to what Mendenhall said earlier this year at his Board of Visitors meeting, we need to go out and find bad teams to play from the Power 5 schools. I guess he's really starting to, with Liberty, maybe starting to implement that a little bit.
Yeah, and it's when you play the FCS schools. Yeah, it's everything to lose, nothing to gain in one sense. It's sort of, though, I mean, I'll defend it in this way. We don't have a preseason in college like they do in the NFL. And now, Virginia lost 2 years ago to Richmond. Actually, last year's game with William and Mary, the opener, that one wasn't an easy one. Final score was 28-13. It was 21-10, a little uncomfortable in the fourth quarter before Virginia scored late and kind of pulled away. But you don't have a preseason in college football. Where you get to play other teams and run game plan and everything else like you would a normal week. Like in the NFL, they at least get to work some kinks out that way. And so this is the best way to do it if that's where you're going to go. Of course, we have other games this weekend. Virginia Tech opens with Florida State. They don't get the easy way in. I think Louisville's at Alabama. Of course, that's an easy one for Alabama this year. Lamar Jackson not around for Louisville anymore. But I think Miami's got LSU. West Virginia plays West Virginia's opens with Tennessee. So, there's different ways to go about it. You can play the tough game and use that as a barometer and see if your team can get ready by having to get ready for a tough opponent. For a young team like Virginia, it's probably best to start light. And we're starting real light. I mean, no offense at all to Richmond, casting aspersions there. They were a playoff team 2 years ago in the FCS level. Didn't make the playoffs last year, stumbled to a 6-5 record. But, then it's Indiana, which is a Big Ten team, but a second echelon or third echelon Big Ten team, and then Ohio U, a MAC team. So, Mendenhall's trying to ease his way into the season with this young team. I can give him credit for that. I'll give him an out this time. I hope that the program builds to the point, Scott, that in a couple of years, which we play, actually, we start with Georgia in 2020. We already know that, the Labor Day night game. But I hope that's something that feels natural, that we're ready to play Georgia week 1, and that we think we can be competitive in that game. I hope that this program gets to that stage where every year we want to play those best schools. But when you're still building, I can see going with a weaker schedule just to, make things as easy as possible. Easier way into the season. You still have tough games coming up later on. I can go with Mendenhall on that one.
Well, and what we don't want to lose sight of is that manipulating a college football schedule is not nearly as easy as it is to manipulate a college basketball schedule. A lot of these games, Coach Mendenhall had nothing to do with. They were contracted games that maybe were contracted 7-10 years ago, and to get out of them would cost them probably a pretty hefty amount of money for Virginia. And when you're only filling your stadium, when you're only half filling your stadium, it's not like they have a printing press somewhere in the bowels of Scott Stadium, so they're not really out there to buy their way out of games. So you're kind of stuck playing the hand that's been dealt you. So I guess he does get a buy in this case. But these first 3 games, if you kind of look at the season in a microcosm of, or break them up in quarters, because we do play 12 games. I mean, these first 3 games, what do you think the over and under would be? If you had to bet one way or the other, would you wager that Virginia would be 3-0, or would you wager that they would be 0-3? No in between.
Yeah. If I had to wager, if that was the strict wager, either 3-0 or 0-3, I'd say 3-0. Just because I don't think they lose all 3 of these games. I think that I think 2-1 to me is the more likely scenario for this. Well, and then it comes down to which of the ones is the loss. And actually, I can look at it. I mean, it could be 1 and 2 as well, because Indiana on the road, Indiana beat us last year. They beat us 34-17 in Charlottesville. Now, Virginia stat-wise controlled that game. It was turnovers that was the big issue for that Virginia team last year in that loss. But stat-wise, yards from scrimmage-wise, Virginia actually held control in that one. But and then Ohio, I don't want to look past Ohio. Ohio's a team that is a lot of folks are looking at as a preseason favorite in the MAC. The Steel preseason guide gives them a chance to win 10, 11. At least one of his models, Phil Steele said, actually gives Ohio U a chance to go 12-0 this year. So, of course, they have to win this one to do that. But they're a team that's looking pretty good in the MAC, and the MAC's a tough mid-major conference in FBS football. So I think Virginia wins one of those 2. I think Virginia wins Richmond and then wins one of those 2. But I think it's a possibility. You beat Richmond, you go out and you upset Indiana. That would be a minor upset. I think Indiana will be favored at home in that one, probably by a couple points, by the basically home field advantage. If you're 2-0 and you beat Ohio U, you're 3-0. So I can see that being a possibility for this team this year, and not even playing necessarily great football to get there.
Well, I hope that's the way that scenario unfolds. But that's a tough road to hoe. But again, 3-0 would set this team up for some pretty lofty end of the season ambitions. But that's a tough run. You take all three of these games. You play Richmond. Okay, there's a lot of it. I'm sure maybe not, but there's an in-state game. A lot of these kids have a lot of pride. Maybe they wanted to play in Virginia. Maybe they weren't recruited by the Division I schools or the FBS schools, whatever you want to call them. So a lot of pride, just like playing William and Mary. You go to Indiana, from what I've been reading, is probably a mid-level Big Ten team, which is a big step up for Indiana. They've generally been one of the bottom dwellers in that conference in football, along with some of the Minnesotas and some of the other Northwesterns. But they've elevated their game. And then you play Ohio University, a MAC team that's not an FCS school, it's an FBS school. So you don't want to lose sight of that. I'm reasonably sure of that.
Oh, yeah. They're looked at as a team that could win that MAC, which is an FBS conference, and they could be a team that could sort of be a game. What do they call it? The New Year's Six buster. They're looked at, one of those teams, one of those the next five, whatever they call them. There's the Power Five and then the Group of Five, I guess they're called. One of those Group of Five teams gets the best of that Group of Five gets a New Year's Day invitation. And Ohio U, from what I'm reading, there is talk of them being a team that could be that Group of Five team playing on a New Year's Day game. For them to get there, they got to win against Virginia in a couple weeks in Charlottesville. So yeah, they're definitely a team that is dangerous to say the least. I think they may come in as a favorite in that one, Scott, and we might be home underdogs to a MAC team.
I think that you're correct. You're absolutely right. Depending upon how these first two games unfold. Yeah, if memory serves me correct, just maybe a handful of years ago, a MAC team, Northern Illinois, played in the Orange Bowl.
Yeah.
And I believe beat Maryland handily.
So yeah, that's not looking past any of those teams. I guess if it comes down to 3-0 or 0-3, I don't think this UVA team starts 0-3, but I think somewhere in the middle, 2-1 or 1-2, much more likely. And now let's put the attention back to the Richmond game for a second. One storyline in this one, Scott, I did some analysis this afternoon, and we were chatting about it before we got on the air here. Both teams have new quarterbacks, and we've known that. The people listening to this podcast, Virginia well. You've been following the roster since the spring. Bryce Perkins is the starting quarterback. He's a JUCO transfer, but he was an Arizona State commit, a 4-star recruit out of high school. Suffered a freak injury as a freshman, ended up redshirting, and then when a new coaching regime came in, he felt like he was on the outside looking in. They actually, I think, asked him to play a different position. I think they asked him to move to wideout. He's a fast man. He's the second fastest player on the team, on this Virginia team. So he was asked to play receiver, said, no, I'm a quarterback. He goes the JUCO route, leads his team, Arizona Western, to the Junior College National Championship game. They lost 31-28. But he put up good numbers last year, completed 63.3% of his passes. He averaged 5.1 yards per rush. His offense ran a read option like he'll run at UVA. And so, Virginia loses Kurt Binkert to the NFL, but the offense might run better because it's designed that way. Robert Anae's offense is designed to be an offense that runs with a read option. Now, Richmond's got its own change at quarterback. Kyle Lauletta's also in the NFL now, 4th-round draft pick of the New York Giants. Kevin Johnson, his replacement this year, isn't exactly someone without any kind of battle testing. He was a true freshman 2 years ago, gave up his red shirt when Lauletta went down to injury in the playoffs. Johnson actually led Richmond to 2 wins in the playoffs, had a 2-1 record in the 2016 playoffs, threw for 300 yards in his first game. So he comes in with experience under fire, probably at a better level certainly than Bryce Perkins does. So you got 2 new quarterbacks in this game, but Richmond's new quarterback has the experience edge on Virginia's new quarterback Perkins. And I'll throw in real quick, Scott, and then we'll be able to chat. Richmond also, I think this is an important note. Kevin Johnson, the new quarterback, who's got experience, they got their 3 best receivers from last year all back. Cortrell Simpson, who's a redshirt junior, had 60 catches, 1,019 yards last year on receptions. Deion Brissett, who's actually O'Shea Brissett's older brother, O'Shea Brissett, Syracuse basketball player, Deion Brissett's a senior, 63 catches last year, 896 yards, and another senior, Tyler Wilkins, 62 catches, 876 yards. They've got three great receivers in this game on this team with a quarterback who has experience. They'll be able to move the ball. So now let's talk about these offenses. I mean, Richmond's got an offense. We saw it 2 years ago. Lauletta threw for a lot of yards in that win. Virginia kind of stumbled out of the gate, couldn't really get anything going in that game 2 years ago. Different offense, though, for Virginia. So it could be a high-scoring game, just the fact that these two offenses should be running at good levels.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, we talk about Perkins being a good quarterback. I don't think we can – I think what we can qualify is that we hope he is going to be a good quarterback because he's not been proven in these situations. And you're right. When playing Richmond, even playing at the Richmond level is going to be a considerable step up playing the competition that he did in the JUCO route. So, again, the thing that really concerns me is the play of the Virginia offensive line. Do we have the depth? Do we have the experience there to make things behind that line tech? Because, we know that as goes the offensive line, so does the quarterback and the running backs behind them. So, I'm just I think that's a huge question mark to see what kind of offensive line play we get on Saturday evening.
Yeah, I would be more concerned if we were starting with a stronger opponent, and I'm not downing Richmond. They beat us 2 years ago, but when I say stronger opponent, I guess maybe an ACC school. If UVA was opening with an ACC school with this year's team, as many newcomers as there are, but you pointed this out the other day, Scott. We talked on our podcast on Monday. The Virginia offensive line, just from a physical standpoint, is much bigger than the Richmond defensive line. So, they're maybe not as experienced. Certainly, there's guys playing out of position in a couple places, but they are ACC recruited athletes, and they're 25, 30 pounds bigger across the line. Not saying that should automatically translate, but I would assume that at least with Richmond, they should be able to get their feet wet, should be able to do some stuff. Now, the area I'm concerned about offensive line. I'm also concerned about the defensive line. Let's talk about that too. The secondary for Virginia, linebackers in the secondary, UVA may have the best, or at least one of the best 2 or 3 linebacker cores in the ACC this year. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that. A lot of guys back there. Secondary's pretty good too. Maybe a top 5 unit in the ACC. The defensive line is young. It's thin in terms of numbers. They only list 5 players on the depth chart for the 3 positions because Eli Handback's listed as a starter at right defensive end. He's listed as a backup at the nose tackle. You got 2 true freshmen who are in this 5, among the 5 in the 2 deep there. So now Richmond doesn't run it. They only ran for 111 yards a game last year. They'll throw and they'll throw and they'll throw some more. So if Virginia opened with a team that liked to run the ball, I'd be very concerned defensively. And if maybe we played a team that had a bigger defensive front, I would feel a little concerned there too. But Richmond may end up being the perfect type of opponent for this year's Virginia team to start with, just because of their own lack of a running game and the fact they like to throw the ball, and the fact that their defensive line is pretty thin itself. It might actually be a good thing for Virginia to kind of get started this year.
Yeah, and something else too. We're talking about maybe the advantage of playing an FCS school is because of the scholarship limitation. Should be a little more, even though Virginia's probably going to be a little depth challenged on the offensive line. Their second teamers should match up well against Richmond's second teamers or even Richmond's first teamers. So, that won't be as much of a problem maybe Saturday as it would be moving ahead when they're playing Indiana and Ohio University, both FBS schools that have a higher scholarship.
Yeah, and I agree. That's a great point. If we started with Indiana, I would be much more concerned going into this one because of that issue there, and also the weather. The weather may improve a little bit for us, and that's a factor when you're talking about lack of depth. The last few days in Virginia, for those who don't live in Virginia or listen to this podcast, it's been oppressive. I guess it's been up that way up and down the eastern seaboard, but it's supposed to be a little cooler, maybe low 80s for Saturday. and then by the time we're playing Saturday night, it'll be even cooler. So I mean, there's still going to be issues with guys. You're going to need a lot of shuttle a lot of guys in and out, especially on your offensive line. That's where the defensive line's lack of numbers concerns me. But I think it's a best case scenario given the time of year, and the opponent and everything else. I think this one may play to the scheduling advantage here may play to Virginia's advantage.
Yes, I think the weather, and the fact that Virginia's offensive line, they got something to prove. The Navy game was just a disaster. I know there's some new faces there. The whole team, I believe, hopefully, just like we alluded to the basketball program and what happened to them at in the NCAA tournament, maybe it was an incentive to work a little longer, work a little harder during the off season. So when the first game rolls around Saturday night, they're not lining up against their teammates. Got something to prove, got something to kind of redeem themselves against. That I think is going to maybe work towards Virginia's favor as well.
Now, one other factor that may or may not work to Virginia's favor, we were talking about this on Monday, and Scott, the phone dropped, and we were unable to finish that part of the podcast. But I talked about attendance, and I was given over/under for attendance at 40,000 last year. That was, I think, Virginia actually averaged 39 and change for its home games. And I presume that your answer would be, because my answer was under, and I presume yours would be under as well. But you had an interesting observation that you think it'll be a good crowd on Saturday. I'm not going to say anything else. You share your thoughts on why you think there'll be a good crowd on Saturday.
Well, I was over, and I'm thinking closer to the 50, maybe 49,000, 48.5, closer to the 50 range. A number of reasons. One, it's the third year. If you take away everything from last year, we had a great start. We had a bad finish. Certainly a disastrous ball game. But, overall, at the end of the year, it was a better season in 17 than it was in Broncos' first year. So, momentum is still there. For the eternal optimist, it's still there. Game time, 6 o'clock. Fans from the big metropolitan areas, Northern Virginia, not Richmond, because Richmond is a big metropolitan area, but literally an hour's drive or less away. Northern Virginia, the Tidewater area, not something they got to get up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and make a noon game. They can leave home early, late morning, still enjoy a full day of tailgating, go to the game, get out of Scott Stadium at a decent time. Hopefully tonight game, the weather's not going to be as big a factor as it was a 12 noon game when you got 90-degree temperatures. I just think new quarterback, maybe the first time that we've truly been able to see the type of offense that Coach Mendenhall wants to run since he's been here. So this is kind of like a second grand opening in that he's getting the key playmakers in place, or at least the type of playmakers that he likes to have. So we're getting, fans, I think they're a little optimistic, and I think it's going to be a really good crowd Saturday.
I'll hope for that to be the case. I hope for you that that's the case. I won't be able to be in the press box. I've got ESPN Plus broadcasting duties with soccer on Saturday. I'll be watching from home. Now, for our listeners out there, Scott will be leading a live blog on our website, AugustaFreePress.com. I'll join in after I get back from my broadcasting duties. But Scott's going to be leading that. He'll also have the post-game story recap. Scott and I will get together. We'll do a podcast with impressions. I'll be able to watch much of the game from the home TV situation. But we're at the point now, the rest of the season we'll be able to do this a little better, Scott, the prediction part of the podcast. And I noted, I wrote a column this afternoon on the website, and I got to the part where I would normally do the prediction, and I said, you know what, I hate doing predictions for the opening game of college football season. It's hard, even with the NFL, even with preseason, it can be hard because, teams don't play their starters as much, and, they won't game plan quite the same. But at least you have something to look at. We have nothing to look at, especially with two teams with a lot of changes on both sides of the ball. So I thought what I'd do, Scott, is I'll give some keys to the game. I'll give you a chance to maybe offer your thoughts in that respect too. But the key for Virginia, I think, is establishing the running game. We haven't talked about that a lot, but because we talked about Perkins, new quarterback. But I think if Perkins at quarterback, and I think you'll see this actually over the course of the season, you'll see him throw the ball certainly, but I don't think he's going to be Kurt Baker threw for, I think, 3,200 yards last year. I don't think if this offense is running the way it should, that Perkins should be throwing for 3,200 yards this year. I think he'll be more in the low to mid 2,000s there, and if he's able to play the whole season, he'll approach 1,000 yards rushing. I think what he can do with the running game in terms of the read option, and then Jordan Ellis, he can open up some holes for him. Olamide Zaccheaus, out of the slot, gets 7-8 carries a game. Running those reverses out of the slot, the way that Ane calls those, designs those option plays, and then the pitch to the running back, kind of reversing field going against the grain. So I think to me, the key on Saturday is going to be UVA getting a running game going. One, to take advantage of that size on the line advantage that they'll have over Richmond's defensive line, and two, just to keep Perkins, give him a game where he's not asked to do a lot. He's not asked to save the world. He's not going to throw the ball in coverage. He's not going to have a lot of third and long kind of situations where he's got to throw the ball in the middle of the field. Give him an relatively easy night game plan wise. Let him do what he can do well running the ball. Make a few passes. Obviously, get the ball in the air a little bit. But if he can get out of this game without a turnover, if this offense can just keep the chains moving, that'll help keep the Richmond offense off the field. And I think, what I expect to see out of Richmond, I'll be honest, this is an odd thought, but I expect to see Richmond, Scott, try to run the ball too. They only ran for 111 yards a game, like I noted last year, but that's the weak point of the Virginia defense. So it would not surprise me, at least in the first quarter, maybe into the second quarter, to see Richmond running the ball more than you might see them run the rest of the season, just to see if they can find some weaknesses in that Virginia front. But I think Virginia will do well defensively. I think in the end, Virginia wins this game relatively comfortably, but I'd like to see it kind of play out where if you don't make Perkins do too much, run the ball and play some good defense, win a game the way actually Bronco wants to win a game. So that's sort of my breakdown. Scott, give us your thoughts.
Pretty much agree with you. Offensive line for Virginia is going to be a key. I think ideally, you talked earlier about Benton throwing for over 3,200 yards last year, whatever it was. For this team to be successful, I'm not sure that we want or need Perkins to throw for 3,200 yards. I'm more in agreement that his per game numbers are going to be in that 185 to 200 and some yards a game, but his rushing is going to open up a lot of things too. So maybe throwing for season end total somewhere in the low to mid twos and rushing for maybe 800 to 1,000 yards. I think that has the makings of a really good season for Virginia. The offensive line will back up again. Yeah, I think both teams are going to attack the other team's weaknesses. So for Richmond, they are going to probably run the ball a little more. They're going to look at our defensive line as maybe being a little soft. Our offensive line should have some advantages over that defensive line that we talked about earlier in the week, being a little outmanned position by position. Maybe opens up the running game a little more. I think Bronco's going to be a little conservative. I don't know if I'd use the word vanilla. I think he's going to use pretty much the whole playbook, but how often he goes to play, a little dicey to be able to guess on that. But I just think that in the end, this is a great opportunity for Virginia to get out of the gate with a very encouraging win. And I'm going to predict a Virginia win of somewhere in the neighborhood of 27-10.
That sounds about right. That sounds, if I was giving a number to it, I think, you'll see Richmond be more effective perhaps in the second half throwing the ball just because they'll have to, because they'll be behind. I assume that Virginia will, have the game to that stage where they might be a score or two up, and then Richmond starts throwing the ball more, and just because you throw it more, you'll get some yards. But they'll get their yards, but I don't think they'll get a lot of points, and I think that should be the way this goes. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. The weather should be a good should be a good part of this. Hopefully, a good crowd for the opening game as the Hoos host Richmond. It's 6:00 kickoff. I think the game's an ESPN3 game, so for fans. If you're watching from home, you'll be able to find it on any of your devices, your phones, your tablets, of course, the computer. And you can also join along with us if you're on because you'll be on the internet somehow. You'll be on your phone or your tablet or your computer somehow because you got to watch that way. We'll be live blogging, so join Scott on the blog. Scott will share some of his observations as the game plays out. I'll eventually join in as well, and then of course we'll have the post game recap and podcast and our breakdown coming up after the game. So full day Saturday, and of course you can also check out. So in addition to this podcast, go to our website. I've got on the Augusta Free Press website, I've got both of Bronco Mendenhall's press conferences this week, his weekly Monday press conference with the Virginia media, also his teleconference with the ACC media. I've got the transcripts of both of those. They're both on the website. We've got the game preview that I write each week is there. So if you want to know what's going to happen in this game, just go to AugustaFreePress.com and you'll be able to figure it all out. So for Scott German, I'm Chris Graham signing off. Thanks, everybody, and wahoo-wah.